Welcome to a collaboration between Angie and Christie Write Now and Strong Women's Strange World. Are you ready for a journey through the realms of science fiction, fantasy, and horror? Our guest today is a multi-talented artist, a master of words, and a weaver of fantastical tales. From the depths of her vivid imagination, she brings forth stories that transport readers to magical kingdoms and realms of darkness. As a musician, a poet, and an editor, she brings a unique perspective to her storytelling, infusing her prose with melody, rhythm, and soul. Her works have graced the pages of prestigious publications like the Magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction, and her novel Esprit de Corpse from the East Beck book promises a passage into the heart of steampunk paranormal romance that you will never forget. Her creativity doesn't stop there. When she's not crafting narratives, you can find her playing the soprano bugle in the Blessed Sacrament Golden Knights Drum and Bugle Corps, or cuddled up with her chow chows in Haddonfield, New Jersey. Get ready to be enchanted by our guest's stories and inspired by her boundless energy. We are thrilled to welcome the amazing F. Deal to our podcast. F, welcome.
Yay. Wow, is that me?
That is you. You have done all of that.
I have done all of that. Yes, I have.
Is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
Well, I will only add that for 30 years, I also taught in an English class. And I think I did a pretty good job because I have a good following of my former students. And a lot of them have gone on to really significant places in life.
Oh, I love that.
Best tribute to you, a teacher.
Yes, I totally
they're
agree.
Wonderful people. Yeah.
So, as with all of our authors that come onto this podcast, our first question is always, how did you know you wanted to, or when did you know that you wanted to be a writer?
When is easy. I was 9 years old. Growing up, I was a reader. I was a very, very young reader at 3 years of age. I swept through whatever I was allowed to read in my house because my dad was a reader, but he read, trash, Harold Robbins, and really, no, you're not allowed to read that book because it has those words in it. But luckily, I lived on a street with a library. And I wandered into the library, read the entire children's section. By the time I was 9, I had finished up the horror science fiction section. My librarian, who was very, very liberal, she brought me the magazine of fantasy and science fiction. And oh, my heart, I said, someday I'm going to write a story and it's going to go in this magazine. And doggone it, I did, which was just,
Nice.
Oh, yes, that was a dream. The writing part of it came from the fact that my parents would go out bowling. My older sister, who babysat, just put on music that I didn't like and TV I didn't like. So I took out my mother's typewriter and I wasn't allowed to use her paper. So I would steal paper from school or the cards that used to come. Now, you ladies are very young, so you may not know this, but stockings used to come in a package with cardboard.
I remember that. Yes.
And that's where I would type some stories on there, too.
Oh, wow.
So then you always
typewriters.
I know.
Where you have to go back and take the white out and white out the word.
Oh, yes.
Don't even remind me. So you always wrote spec fic, like you were always either science fiction, fantasy, or horror from the beginning.
Mm-hmm. My earliest one was vampire stuff. Then I moved into science fiction and I had this whole novel planned out of a woman who comes from space and it was very basic and I didn't get far, but I had it all mapped out. I knew what was going to happen.
So who were your inspirations as a child? Which authors did you lean towards?
Well, Ray Bradbury and Isaac Asimov first. Mm-hmm. They were very influential. I read every Bradbury. It was much easier to read than Asimov. With Asimov, so much went by because I was too young to get a lot of his science, but I loved his characters. Mm-hmm. But the biggest influence wasn't so much an author as it was Alfred Hitchcock, because he had anthologies of all of these quirky horror stories, almost humorous if they weren't so horrible, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And that led me to Theodore Sturgeon. And there's another influence there, that ugly twist at the end, and I have a couple of those too.
Those are the best stories though, when you like
Yeah.
something weird happens at the end. I love that. I love that. It's
Mhm.
best. So those were some very nice names that you just told us about influencing you. So I can totally see that with having read all of those, and you read them very young. So having read
Yeah.
all of those very young, I can completely see why you would go straight into science fiction and fantasy and horror. When's the first time that you remember like writing an entire story and then thinking, I think this one I want to get published?
Well, of course, I thought that when I was young. I just didn't know how to go about it. Um, and technically, I wrote a novel when I was in sixth grade, and when we got to seventh grade, I was just finishing it up, and my reading teacher, who was the laziest son of a gun you'd ever want to know, what are you doing? What's all this stuff? I said, that's a novel I'm writing. Oh, well, let's read it. And he read it to the class. So technically that was publication. And
Yes.
doggone it, it was well received and it was pretty good. And believe it or not, I never thought of sending it anywhere because I wouldn't know where to send it. I think 40, 50 years later, out comes the movie Spy Kids, and it had the same plot that I'd.
I love
Awful.
it.
But the first novel that I said this is good for publication was a high fantasy, epic fantasy, featuring a woman protagonist, and of course, all of the high stuff at that time period in the late 70s, early 80s. It was all about the guy,
Yeah.
and I thought, wow, no, it can be about the girl.
Yeah.
Um, and knowing, I mean, seriously, nothing about the business, I packaged it up and I sent it to Lester Del Rey, Ballantine Books, Del Rey Books, and I never heard a thing, not even an acknowledgement that they got it. So, as far as I knew, it was out in the world somewhere. Nothing ever happened. Oh well, 2 years later, it comes back to me with a rejection, but with the most amazing rejection you'd ever want to get from Lester Del Rey, personally typed, coffee stain on the paper and all. And he told me that I would write wonderful characters, that my dialogue is very clear, that the characters come through with the dialogue, and my descriptions. I mean, it was nothing but praise, praise, praise. Unfortunately, we have to make tough decisions, and this was one of them. And the book that did come out at the end of 2 years later was Terry Brooks' Sword of Shannara. So there you go. But that was my first experience, and that told me that I wasn't good enough to write. So I put it up on a shelf, and I never really did anything again until about 6 or 7 years later, when we were playing Dungeons and Dragons, and I just swooped up these characters and I wrote a novel about them. And that also got to every single top editor or top agent's desk. But everybody wanted my protagonist to be more romantic.
Mm.
Why doesn't she kiss the guy at the end? And I'm dealing with a victim of sexual abuse. And I thought, did you not read the book? Do you not read the newspapers? It's interestingly, now that's back in 1984. In 2023, a story featuring that character was the anchor story for an anthology on kick-ass women. That's what he wanted. Do you have kick-ass women confronting the supernatural? I said, yeah, I think I got a story for you. And he said, oh, I love it. Do you have anything more by her? So there's a good chance you'll see her coming out soon. I don't know.
That's
Doesn't
Very
send
awesome.
him off,
fun.
How
I
much
very
fun.
much like that. Yeah, that would be great. So now, when you went to study, then you went to study French, like you graduated with a degree in French. So how did that all, because I would have thought maybe a science background or an English major or something like that. Like, how did all of that come about?
Well, it came about because of an overly optimistic guidance counselor who, at the same time, told me flat out in seventh grade, girls can't be astronauts. So there I was, just primed for that career. But as I said, I'd been doing stories and writing and reading a lot. So I did my focus more on the humanities. English and French were my top languages. So I went to major in both of those and figured I'd become a teacher.
I love it.
That's
Love it,
awesome.
love it, love it.
And being an
That's
English
very,
major, I could still keep writing.
oh, absolutely.
Hmm.
So what is your writing process when you do you like write have an idea and then do an outline, or do you dream it out and kind of come up with it and pants it, or what is your process when you start writing?
The process has really evolved, but I've been focused since 2007 on the Twins of Belfait.
Mhm.
And so the process there was that, again, I'm always looking for a strong female protagonist. And this is a very bizarre beginning for this one, but it tells you where my brain works. We were watching The Adventures of Briscoe County Jr., and the professor, John Aston, one of my favorite character actors, met these two women, the Schwenke sisters. And the Schwenke sisters were blacksmiths, and they swung hammers and they welded and they built machinery, and they had muscles out to here. And I thought, now they would make a great spin-off series. And this is before the word steampunk was invented, but the concept was there right in Briscoe County. And so I'm thinking about these two girls. In 2008, we go to France, and we stayed in a couple of chateaus. And this one is the one that just completely charmed us the most. And this is the Chateau Brou near Chinon. And you can see the high
It's
windows, the
beautiful.
turrets. And I said, well, this is where they live. Then we visited another chateau where Jack and I were sitting now, and this was like the first day of summer, so the sun doesn't go down till 11 o'clock at night. And as we're sitting there, we're overlooking this little pond down at the hill, the bottom of the hill, and we hear this quacking, but we don't see any birds. And I'm thinking, where are these ducks? And it's quack, 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 quack. So we go down the hill to look for them, and we're finding nothing. And with that, one of the maintenance people come out and said, "Oh, they're toads. They're toads that bark." I said, "I have to have that in my book." So it's gathering impressions before anything else. Um, that's my first process, and that may take a very very long time. But once I gather it, it's permanent, and they live in that world. The next step is doing the research. When did they live? And I started researching the people from 1840 to 1888 because I wanted it to be at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution and not at the Sherlock Holmesian, H.G. Wells. I wanted Jules Verne, pre-Jules Verne. So I started researching the science, the medicine, the chemistry, the social, the artist. And as I was researching the artist, it came to me that that the two twins would be different. And one was the genius engineer, but the other was this prodigy on the piano. And so she's super artist and she's super genius. And so I figured that would be pretty super. But something had to be different. Something had to catch the tragic end of things because the genius's life, she's like, oh, I invented this, I invented this, everything's all right and good. So I made her sister the opposite. And that's where, of course, Angelique comes in. And
Nice.
she's not actually that kind of werewolf, but she's a wolf. So that's
Nice.
so then I had to research wolves. As I gather the scientific details and the historical details, they begin to suggest a plot. And so the only thing I actually map is what is the social theme I want to address? What is the historical setting I want to address? What is the supernatural element? What is the conflict? And when I mapped all those four out, because that comes out of the research, and I see where these details intersect, that's where I get my plot, and boom, it goes. It just goes. And as I said, I love rabbit holes. they they give me everything. I have 5 novels completed with the twins,
Mhm.
and a lot of short stories.
It
So does
sounds
that mean
fun.
then that, yeah, it does. It sounds amazing. But does that mean then that you don't even have an outline when you sit down to write?
That's correct.
Mm.
I don't. I know what needs to happen,
Mhm.
but it's not an outline. I was looking at, historical figures at the time. Eugène Delacroix, the artist, was one of them. And I was looking through his journals and diaries, and one of the things he said was, I rode the Paris-Orléans train to, uh, so he was visiting Georges Sand and Chopin, who were lovers at the time. And he said, the cushions and this train and the short ride, it is a blessing to my arthritic bones or rheumatic bones. And I thought, that's it. This story takes place on a train. And so I had ideas of what were going to happen along the way on that train. And initially, I thought, can I set the whole thing on one train ride? Why not? They did it for, Orient Express.
That's right.
So so I planned my research to train museums in France, so I could get an accurate picture of what this train was and what could be done with it. And we landed in Paris on March 14th, 2020. If that does that ring a bell?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
How
we
long were
got
you in
thrown out of the
Paris?
country the next day.
Oh
Yeah.
no.
That was, and
Wow.
we got to one train museum which happened to be less than a kilometer from our hotel, just outside, just on the other side of the périphérique, the wall that surrounds Paris. So we take a quick short hop over to this train station. It was an adorable little train station, about as big as my living room. Um, but they also had a book on the history of railroad. So I bought the book, and there was maybe a half a page that had any information that I needed.
Oh,
So, okay, I guess this isn't going to, take place there. So, as I began to contemplate, I knew that they were going to run into a mechanical man. I didn't know why. And that's when tours I was going to take was the catacombs, and just to show Jack. And I thought, okay, I've been to the catacombs. There's plenty of stuff in the catacombs online. It's going to happen in the catacombs. That's where it is.
that's spooky
and
enough.
and
Absolutely.
Things
and I don't
change.
I don't know
Things
if you can see
change.
the
Yeah.
cover is amazing on this. You can see the bones and skulls
Right.
of
Oh.
that, and there is my mechanical man. And
Nice.
it worked out. It worked out. But
Mhm.
I think if I had had an outline and had everything fixed with an outline, I think I might have just crumbled into the ground and died. you know. So I like to be a little bit loose that way.
So do you write linear? Or do you write from the beginning of the story to the end, or do you write in
Yeah.
pieces, like taking a scene here and a scene there, and then
I'm linear, and for me, it helps ground me in the tone of what I'm writing. I can't just write a scene in isolation if I don't know what it feels like coming out of that scene before it. So yeah, I mean, I know the scene, but I never jot it down. I
Mhm.
might jot down a line.
Okay.
Um, the piece I'm working on right now, the girls are in Wales, and Charles Dickens is going to visit the chateau where the castle where they are. This is just before Dickens. He has these ideas in his mind of a story he wants to write for Christmas, and he's really desperate for money because he's broke at this point. And his editor is saying, "I need something. You got to give me something." He goes, "It's coming, it's coming." But it wasn't there. Like me, he had all the pieces, but he didn't have the story. So the premise of the novel is going to be that his experiences at this castle with the girls is actually the outline of A Christmas Carol.
That's so
And so
cool. I
when he
love
arrives at the
that.
castle, the first words out of his mouth are going to be doornails. Doornail. What why is a doornail dead? Maybe we say dead as a doornail, but but it's not dead. It's wood. It was never alive, you know. And so that argument, which is the start of A Christmas Carol in the first place, dead as a doornail. Um, that's I know that somewhere along the line, Dickens is going to say that in my story. So
I
Mm.
love it.
that's the only thing that plans ahead.
So do you know the end and when you before you start the story, or do you just kind of whatever happens in the story itself um turns out to be, I mean, influences what comes out in the end? That makes sense.
I know what I think the ending is going to be, but a lot of times I don't know what the story is about, um, theme wise or message wise, worldview wise. And sometimes I don't know what the story is about until I get to the end. And then I go back and I see, you know, you got to give yourself some distance. The book two is coming out the end of this year sometime, Eros and Eros. And I thought this was going to be a story about how Jacqueline can be on her own and still be dependent upon her boyfriend, you know, that she's always been on her own and she's always been the one that looks after everyone else. And now she's got this guy. It's the first time she's ever been in love, and he's amazing. And she feels like she's losing control of her life and who she is. And what I realized at the end was that she had to abandon who she thought she was and recognize who she actually is in all circumstances.
Mm.
So then I had to go back and reframe some of the scenes to make her not so helpless. I mean, so I built it from feeling like she was helpless to the very end where she takes a very dramatic and almost tragic step in her life that changes everything, absolutely everything about her.
Oh, wow.
Um, and that is
That
not necessarily a good thing, but it is what it is. And she learns to accept that.
Mhm.
So, um, yeah, I know the ending, but that doesn't mean it's going to stay there.
So what's the hardest part for you then? Is it the drafting or is it the editing?
The hardest part is getting an idea of where I want to go with all of what I've looked up. It's easier when you have characters you know.
Mhm.
When I was writing that high fantasy, um, uh, the one that got turned down by everybody, and I still think it's a good one. Um, but while I was writing it, it was like once I knew this character, it was like she was whispering in my ear. Guess what I did last night? And she would tell me the story, and oh, I got to write this down. And so knowing the people involved, I could see the interplay.
Mm.
And the same is true with my twins. Now that I know who they are and what they love and what they can do, I can begin to see them in different situations. I know their childhood. Um, the story in Other Ether, which is the other anthology that came out. This is steampunk stories from around the globe. In this particular one, my Jacqueline Duval is only 13 years old. I know her history.
Well, and knowing your characters, I mean, as their mother, who is your favorite child? Like, of the
Oh,
characters, I know.
that's a nasty
I
question.
know. Do you have? I mean, do you have a favorite, or is
I
it, or
well,
do you love
I
them?
love Jacqueline and Angelique both,
Okay.
but my favorite child is still Gwyneth, the sword and sorcery slinger. I had planned 9 novels with her. I finished 4. I have 2 half novels, but after the first novel, they're actually collections of novellas
Mm.
or novelettes. Each chapter is its own adventure, and the
I love
adventure
that.
takes her to a place. In the second of that series, she goes to the city. She just wants to make money as a minstrel, but eventually the prince finds out about in what happened in the first book, which was connected to his treasures, and so he wants her as his servant, as his puppet, and so it's a road of self-destruction. She has to get out of the city without him catching her. And the third book, she finds a nice little town, cute little place on the waterfront, the prince's brother is there working undercover, and he manages to get her working for him. And so, and again, it's all, this is, this is one of the things that they did. This is one of the things they did. This is, and it's just a lot of fun watching her adventures.
So when it came time to decide how you were going to publish, what what went into your decision of either going traditional or self-publishing? Like how did you decide?
As I said, I owe so much to Greg Frost. Um, as we were, as he was giving me this master class over dinner, he said, "Do you go to PhilCon?" I said, "What is PhilCon?" He said, "Okay, there are these things called conferences for writers science fiction." And I mean, he took me to basic elementary level. And he said, "And this takes place right in Philly, and you have to go." So I said, "Okay, I'll go." And I'm going to panel after panel, and I am seeing all of those authors that I have read is sitting around discussing, this is great. you know, he had given me tips, and he also gave a couple of avenues into publishers, and so that's when I started sending the Sword and Source. Once I finished it, once I rewrote it from scratch, um, I started sending it, and he paved the way for that. I sat down next to Gardner Dozois, very celebrated editor and author. He was in charge of was Asimov's at the time, and he sits next to me and says, "So why haven't I ever heard of you?" I said, "Well, I don't really write science fiction anymore." He said, "I don't care. Send me something and I'll tell you what to do with it." So I sent him something, and he said, "Yeah, you're really good. I can't publish this, but yeah, you got some chops." So those kinds of things actually helped me get the confidence to approach Danielle, Danielle Ackley McPhail. And she's not a vanity publisher by any means. Man, what an editor. She is amazing. She has a sense of bringing your character into the environment and letting the environment tell the story. And that's something I always tried to achieve myself, and she taught me how to do it better. So, I sent her the twins, and we were set. And I have another small publishing house, Speculations Publications. They began by doing, you take speculation on an urban legend, say the Jersey Devil or the Crybaby Bridge, which is one of the ones I'm in. There's always these urban legends hanging about. And why do you think that is? Who do you think is that lady in white that you always see on the road when you're driving, and it's a dark, dark, dark thing? They put together a publication post Dobbs. For us, Dobbs was the took away Roe v. Wade, and it is a collection of stories of rage, women's rage. And they asked me to write the foreword for it, and they said they got more comments on the foreword than on any of the stories. And
Nice.
they asked me to contribute to Crybaby Bridge, and that was an easy one because we had a terrifying bridge in my hometown. It was a rite of passage to be able to cross that bridge. So I was able to merge the details of my past to the to justify a Crybaby Bridge there. And and I will be in their next publication, Grim Retold. And so I'll be retelling the story of Fitcher's birds.
I love how you bring everything that's been in your life into your books. Like I really, really love that. It's not everybody that does that. Like, you know what I mean? So I love how every little bit that it's almost like you like you were saying, it's an accumulation and then it comes out a full story. I absolutely love that. That's fantastic.
I don't understand how other people write, because I started this in isolation. So you know, getting to meet other authors and find out what they do, how they do it, it just fascinates me. But at the same time, I thought I could never do that.
Yeah, that's why we do this podcast because we
Yeah.
love speaking with authors and seeing how they do everything. And we've done quite a few now, and I don't think we've ever met two that do the same thing. It's
Oh,
incredible the number of
Yes.
ways that you can write a book.
yeah.
And I think also that the pantsers are winning, Angie. Like there's
Well, we have had quite a few pantsers lately. I mean, before for
right?
a long period of time, it was the plotters. And I was feeling a little like, ooh, well, maybe I
A little
should stop plotting. But you know
down
what? Pants, pantsers for the win.
on this one.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
but
Absolutely.
the thing about pantsing is you have to know what size pants you're wearing.
Yes.
So that's
Which is very
that's the
difficult
research.
sometimes.
Yes.
So I am going to ask you the question that we ask every author that comes onto our podcast, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but you will have to tell us is what is the one thing that you think you did during your writing career that made the most difference?
For the career, the one thing I did was go to the Pen Writers Conference and meet Greg Frost.
That's
Absolutely.
what I thought. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
I will also say when he told me, and now you have to understand, I had this 135,000 word document in front of him, this big, back in the days before computers, really. He said, you have to write this entire thing from here instead of here. And that's the line that made the difference. And the fact that I didn't crumble into the ground and say, I can't do that. I can't, I don't already. That was it. He said, you have to do this. And I said, okay, I'll do it. And that whole exercise, I ended up, once I finished it, I ended up going back with 4 or 5 more passes just to get even deeper in where I knew it needed to be deeper. And then I did the Poe thing where Poe says, get all your elements to combine to a single effect. So you look at your word choices. Was it sunrise or was it dawn? Um, and it really does make a difference a lot of times because sunrise is so hopeful. Dawn comes like, and it just it colors the text.
Mm,
So
Agree.
yeah.
that's beautiful.
It's like an artist. Yeah, I agree. Like
Mhm.
your word choice is absolutely like the color that you're using on your paper. Absolutely.
Well,
Which is
and for me,
it's been so frustrating because I'm translating Esprit de Corps into French, and of course, if you know dogs, they make a range of sounds, but I can only find 2 words in French: whine and growl. Well, she didn't growl, she gruffed. They don't have a word for that. That little, like
Mhm.
there's and but there's so much in between with a dog, and
I know.
so
I find Americans and English, we tend to make up words if they don't exist.
oh,
So
yeah, that's true.
thank you so much for telling us all of this. Like I could listen to you for hours. I think we should just all meet up and just have tea one time and just listen to your stories because they are mesmerizing and I love them. In a special segment as part of the collaboration with Strong Women's Strange Worlds, please enjoy F. Deal as she reads a passage from her story in the anthology entitled A Cry of Hounds.
hi, I'm F. Deal, and this is A Cry of Hounds, an anthology of Arthur Conan Doyle inspired steampunk stories. And I will be reading my story, The Night of the Howling Wind, or as the Irish know it, Mara. William Foley froze in his tracks as an eerie howl resounded throughout the village. It was not that the early morning air was so still that the howl seemed to descend from heavens and reverberate on the air like thunder from a faraway tempest. Nor was it the juxtaposition of snowdrifts, unseasonably warm temperatures for January, and the haunting animal cry that unnerved Foley. It was the singular fact of the howl itself. For there are no wolves in Ireland, he said, as if to reassure himself. Standing on Foley's doorstep with a large bundle under his arm, Constable Ryan stared up to the heights of the Duke's castle. No, there are not, he agreed. Coming to see you. One of the Duke's men came down to say there'd been a bit of a row and a theft. A woman made off with a necklace. He tracked her into the palisade and found this. He unfurled a blue satin gown, blood-stained and slashed. In his other hand, he held undergarments, equally gory. Sorry to disturb you, Ryan said. Know you're busy, nulling the bane and all the fixins, referring to the custom of husbands preparing the Epiphany feast for their wives' little Christmas. Foley ushered him into the foyer, but a call from the street stopped him before he closed the door. Un moment, monsieur. A woman hurried toward them. Are you Ryan? They awaited the Frenchwoman, a tall, heavy-set girl with a comely face, heavily dressed for a hunt, though she carried no gun. Constable Ryan, she said, tugging the man's arm, it is vitally important that you bring the villagers inside the cathedral before nightfall. I am not exaggerating when I say their lives are at stake. What's your tone, ma'am? Ryan pulled away. I'm not your servant. Listen. She stood, fist on hips. Just listen. The men waited in the heavy silence. The heavy warm air closed around them, deadly quiet. But no, Foley realized. Horses nickered nervously. Dogs whined. Oddly, he could even hear conversations from a few lanes over. Is it because of the wolf? He asked. No, monsieur, something much more deadly. Deadlier than this? Ryan held out the clothing. Her lips pressed to a tight line. This was done by human hands, she said. What's coming now is far worse. Please, Constable, the entire village is in danger. William, Catherine called from within. Close the door. Come inside. A moment, Mrs. Foley, he answered. Foley awaited the Frenchwoman, but with an angry growl, she stalked off. Hi there. Ryan trotted after her and overtook her. Come back and talk to us rationally, ma'am. She rubbed her brow, studied the sky. Very little time, but all right. She returned with Ryan, and they joined Foley and his wife inside. As the woman passed into the sitting room, she ran her hand along the doorframe, as though measuring its strength and finding it wanting. Tell me about this dress, Ryan said, looming over her. Is it yours? Is that why you're disguised? She pushed him aside and took a seat. I'm not disguised, monsieur. I hunt a vicious creature, but that is not the issue. My name is Madame Duval. I am a scientist, and my data today tell me you and all Ireland, in fact, are facing great danger. After a silence, Ryan cleared his throat. A vicious creature. He again displayed the clothing. Madame Duval took the gown and draped it over one hand to display the slashes. Whoever wore this took a knife to the axillary artery and to the heart. A vicious bastard of a villain did this, but not the creature I hunt. Murder? Mrs. Foley pressed her hand to her mouth. Where's the body? These were turned in as you see them, Ryan replied. No body. Ah, she returned the gown. So, whoever wore these while bleeding to death in the snow took the time to disrobe. She plucked a twig from the skirt. In the woods. The Palisades, judging from the species. Ryan reddened. These probably accompany a story of theft, n'est-ce pas? Ryan's eyes narrowed. But this isn't the danger you're hunting? No, Constable. I hunt the creature whose howl you heard, but that doesn't threaten this village. Madame Duval heaved a frustrated sigh. She leaned forward intently. You must get these people to safety. Otherwise, your town will be ravaged. By what? By what you're hunting? Not important. Indulge me. Again, she tightened her lips as if debating, and then she said, a werewolf.
That is such a cliffhanger. Do you do audiobooks? Because you should.
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh, your voice is perfect. It's just so perfect for the story. Uh,
I was right there with you the
I
entire
really
time.
was. I was like,
That
and
was
now I'm like, oh, I want to read the book.
that was
Well,
fantastic.
All right.
you
So can you
ladies are
tell
wonderful.
everyone where they can find you on social media?
I am F Deal, and I know it looks like a fake name, but that is my name. I married Jack Deal, and my little brother had nicknamed me Ethel, so it was F. And I am fdeal.net for a website, fdeal@gmail.com, and fdeal@blogspot.com. And same thing on Facebook. There's two profiles, and the green profile is my author's profile,
Okay.
so you can follow my news there.
And do you have a book coming out soon?
I do not. I won't say soon. But it is due out the end of this year.
Okay.
The sequel to Esprit de Corps is called Corpse is called Aero et Aero, and that's aerostats, balloons, and heroes, because it's a question of what makes a hero.
Okay.
Nice.
That sounds fun. So you'll have to definitely come back when the book releases, just to let us know how everything's going.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I hope so.
Okay, well, this was a collaboration between Strong Women, Strange Worlds. And we didn't really ask before, how did you get into working with Strong Women, Strange Worlds?
Well, a friend of mine was asked to read for them, and she blurbed it all out there. And I love this woman, Carol Geisander, a great horror writer. And she also likes those cute little twists. And when she reads in a soft voice of the most horrible things. So I went to see her reading, and they asked for volunteers. And at that time, that was about the time I was doing the church videos in 2020. So I said, yeah, well, I'm doing video editing if you'd like me to do that. They said, oh, this is great, cool. So I've been doing their editing for the last 5 years.
If you enjoyed this particular video and hearing answer the 10 questions, if you hop over to Strong Women Strange Worlds after this video is over, then you get to see her exclusive content where she reads a few pages from her novel. Her accents are fantastic. She puts you right in the setting. I mean, I felt like I was really in that little village, and I was terrified about what was going to happen next. So definitely, after you leave here, hop over to Strong Women Strange Worlds and watch the video with F. It's so much fun. Also, we hope that you enjoyed these videos, so please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and you can watch these videos anywhere, or actually listen to them as well, anywhere podcasts are, anywhere you have podcasts. I can never say that right. Thank you so much for having us on, and thank you, F Deal, for coming on and joining us, and thank you to Strong Women Strange Worlds for referring her over, because she's been a delight. So thank you so much.
Thank you, ladies.
Until next
Christy,
time.
Angie, it was a wonderful time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Until next time.